They say the world's most astonishing secrets aren't on other planets, but right here on Earth, in the cracks of reality untouched by the boot of man and his lantern. I've searched for those cracks all my life. A lone botanist, obsessed with unknown species. And then, in the headwaters of the Vespera River, in a canyon where the sun peers in for only an hour at noon, and night falls thick as black velvet, I found him. I was picking my way along a narrow trail above an abyss. Twilight, the air hummed with silence. And suddenly, below me, on a tiny ledge bathed in the last crimson rays, I saw a glimmer. Not a firefly, not a mineral, something alive, breathing light. My heart hammered like a forge. I climbed down, risking a fall, and froze. He looked like an opalescent leaf brought to life from another star. Translucent, fragile, and the eyes. God, the eyes. Two huge crystals catching the dying sunlight. They shimmered with every sunset hue, scarlet, gold, violet. And on his chest, pulsed a tiny sphere, like a captured miniature star. With each ray, it flared brighter, filling the creature with life. He wasn't afraid of me. He seemed utterly absorbed in the sacred ritual of consuming light. I named him Photophyllum, Lightleaf. I camped further away, hidden by rocks. Days turned into secret worship of the light. At dawn, Photophyllum caught the first timid rays, his core flickering cold blue. At noon, when the sun briefly flooded the canyon, he bloomed, his fibers glowing amber, his core burning dazzling white. And at dusk, oh, dusk, he became living sunset, soaking up crimson and gold, his crystals glowing like embers. At night, he curled into a dimly glowing bud, a tiny lantern in the canyon's absolute dark. He knew I was there. Sometimes he'd turn those crystalline eyes towards me. Not fear, just curiosity. Acknowledgement. I felt an incredible privilege to witness this pure dance with light. I began to understand his fragility. Once, I carelessly struck a match for a tiny fire. He instantly coiled into a bud, his light almost vanishing, just a faint tremor inside. It took a day of silence and darkness for him to dare unfurl again at dawn. I threw away all my matches. Then, weeks later, the unthinkable happened. I heard voices. A group of tourists with powerful headlamps, laughing, descending into the canyon. At night, panic seized my throat. I ran to them, shouting, begging them to turn off their lights, that something fragile, sacred, was here. They looked at me like I was mad. What, scared of ghosts, old man? One laughed, and swung his beam straight into the darkness, right where I knew my photophyllum was hiding. A sound tore through the air, like the thinnest glass shattering under unbearable pressure. And a cry, not loud, but piercing, vibrating, like the shriek of a snapping string, filled with such agony it froze the blood in my veins. And light. A blindingly painful, unnaturally white flash burst from the darkness, brief and horrifying. The tourists cursed in terror, flicking off their lamps. An oppressive silence fell. At dawn, I found him. He lay on his ledge, no longer translucent, but murky gray, like ash. His wondrous crystal eyes were dull, webbed with cracks. The stellar core. It was dark, utterly dark, extinguished. I carefully lifted him in my palms. He was cold and impossibly light, like thistledown. No trace of shimmering pollen. I buried him there, on the ledge, under a stone. The tourists left, frightened and bewildered. They hadn't seen the creature. They killed something they couldn't comprehend, without ever knowing it existed. And now, looking at the stars or a sunset, I think of Photophyllum. Of pure beauty nourished only by celestial light. Of a fragile wonder that lived in the shadow of our ignorance. We search for life in space, blinding the night sky with powerful beams, but what if the most astonishing creatures perish right here, beside us, from the first beam of our flashlight? From our inability to see differently. From our fear of the true, deep darkness where another kind of radiance is born. He was the last light of Vespera, and we extinguished him, simply because we could. If you liked the story, subscribe and like it.